I want to share an idea with you. This is an invitation to participate in a series of dialogues about land, farming, and climate activism. It's an invitation to raise questions. They could be provocative, they could be straightforward. It's an opportunity to learn together and share our experience through the telling of stories. This is an open-ended inquiry. It's framed by the build-up to COP26 in Glasgow in November, but I hope the relationships and actions will extend beyond that. So far, I've spoken to a number of farmers about the idea. I've met with Extinction Rebellion activists, and I've had conversations with artists from a range of disciplines. We have a venue booked for an event on Saturday the 16th of May at Glasgow University Union. I see this as the opening chapter of the project. But before we get into planning what we're going to do, I'd like to step back and explain how I got to this point. Why do I want to bring farmers, climate activists, and artists together? Here's my story from the beginning. I was born in Washington, D.C. I liked digging holes in the backyard and playing with soil, as most kids do. We moved to Wales when I was 7 to fulfill my parents' dream of living in the countryside. Our house was in a tiny village called Llanthowel, surrounded by green rolling hills, wildflower meadows, bluebell woods, and sheep. My mum tended a vegetable garden, and we always had good food on the table. I had an appreciation of nature from a young age, exploring the woods and streams all around our house, playing for hours and coming back when I got hungry. I also loved cinema, photography, art, and theatre, which offered windows into new worlds for me and new ways to express my ideas. I moved to Scotland when I was 18 to study film and art history at Glasgow Uni. Of all the places I could have gone, I chose this place. I loved the city. I loved the sandstone tenements and the waste grounds that had been reclaimed by nature. I loved the culture and the people. It became my home, my place. While studying, I volunteered with a community fruit and veg co-op in Sight Hill, a high-rise estate that's since been completely demolished. I listened to the stories of Glaswegian women and refugees from all over the world while we cooked and ate together at the Red Road Women's Centre. I went on to work with communities all over the city, using food as a tool to explore cultural identity, build understanding, and tackle injustice. We grew as much food as we could in lots of lovely gardens and gap sites. At some point, though, I became more and more interested in the amount of land required to feed the city. I travelled around Scotland in a camper van for one art project, meeting farmers and cooks, sharing recipes and trying to understand local growing conditions. I collaborated with other artists at Open Jar Collective on a project looking at the history of dairy farming in Galloway. I learnt about Glasgow's relationship to slavery through sugar and tobacco plantations. I found stories about tatty rustling in Drumchapel when the estate was first built and there were no shops. Mums used to send their kids over to neighbouring fields to steal potatoes for tea. I worked at Whitmuir Community Farm, running education projects and getting to understand organic farming systems. I travelled to Sweden to study farm-scale permaculture and learnt all about no-dig veg production, agroforestry and regenerative grazing. I explored the idea of finding land to start a regenerative farm co-op, but couldn't reconcile leaving Glasgow, which is my home. I continued to find ways to produce food in the city through planting community orchards and talking to people about the soil. Fast forward to now, in my current job at the Soil Association, I get to spend a lot more time with farmers and with cows, which makes me happy. I've been invited into people's homes, listened to their concerns and struggles, their hopes and aspirations. I've seen how often farmers are demonized by the media as being part of the climate change problem, and not very often seen as part of the solution. My day-to-day work involves bringing farmers together to share ideas, develop solutions to the problems they face, and work with researchers to try new methods. I'm lucky to have built relationships with an incredible bunch of farmers who strive to work with nature, not against it. But they still need to make a living, and it's not easy. I know not everyone has the privilege of seeing these viewpoints, understanding the work that goes into building healthy soil and producing food for people to eat. Farming is not like many other jobs. It's your whole life. It's usually your family's life too. It's your identity. What I've learnt more than anything is that every farm is unique, and farmers have a huge amount of knowledge that is often untapped because there are so many pressures on their time or because they're not seen as the experts. At the same time as I was learning about farming, I was also caught up in the energy of people joining Extinction Rebellion and working to build a movement for change. My daughter Rosa took part in the school strikes for climate justice. My friends became actively involved in campaigning. This movement particularly seemed to help young people mobilize and ask questions of the political system that was supposed to represent them. But how did farmers fit into this? Could they be part of the movement? It was a listen-up moment. The climate justice movement has grown rapidly because people are scared and angry and want to change things. But what do we do about our land in Scotland? How should we manage it in the future? I saw more and more people adopting veganism due to environmental concerns, and it has been challenging for animal farmers who are forced into defending their way of life. I felt like not everyone had access to the full picture, or the chance to speak to each other about their motivations and choices. Did it have to be reduced down to an argument between eating meat or adopting a plant-based diet? Were there only two options? Not all farming systems are the same. Some practices can do massive damage to ecosystems or to soil carbon, but other practices can help restore wildlife and sequester carbon in the soil. It seems to me that how we farm is much more important than exactly what foods we choose to eat, but that's open for debate. For those of us who can't produce all our own food, we could be inviting farmers into conversations about what kind of agricultural systems we want. As concerned citizens, we need to understand what kinds of food we can produce here in Scotland and what impacts different production methods have. Unfortunately, there are no easy answers. One thing we could be doing is asking better questions and telling more nuanced stories. We could avoid false dichotomies, like farming versus rewilding, and instead embrace complexity and the idea of people sharing land with nature. We could explore all the scientific evidence available, but also recognize that it can sometimes be reductive. Intricate biological systems are hard to study in the lab, so it would help to value the experience of farmers, along with engaging the science community. I also want to bring artists into this dialogue, because they can help to communicate ideas and stories in new ways. When I say artists, I mean dancers, poets, musicians, photographers, filmmakers, illustrators, playwrights, all kinds of art forms. Human culture finds expression in a myriad of ways, and reimagining how our society and our economy will function requires a lot of creativity. For the last few years, I thought my goal was to become a regenerative farmer. But for the moment, I want to help frame a more diverse and inclusive conversation about farming and climate activism. I want to bring people together who don't normally get the chance to talk. I'm inviting you to approach this conversation openly and respectfully. We may not agree on everything, but we might find some moments of optimism and positive action that can be taken. Above all, I hope that this dialogue about the land could help to build solidarity and trust in the face of a fragile future.